Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I am here with a good friend of mine and someone that I admire not only for the products that he produces, but the places that he has traveled in the world. I've got Lance Gillies with me. He is the founder and CEO of Earth Cruiser, and we will talk a little bit about Earth Cruisers today, but we really want to spend some time talking about Lance as a traveler and also the things that he's learned not only as a traveler but as a builder of expedition campers that I think will apply to a lot of the listeners. We can glean a lot of insights from someone who has spent decades traveling the world and building unique vehicles. And Lance started off in Australia, and he has traveled. He's done some significant expeditions, including one that we're going to spend some time talking about today, crossing Kalimantan in Borneo, sticking within a few degrees of the equator, and that was something that he just recently completed and a very significant adventure in and of itself. So thank you for being on the podcast, Lance.
Mate, thanks for having me. You must be getting to the bottom of the barrel to get me here.
No, it is a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. And we first talked when this was 2011, and you were coming to the U.S. with Earth Cruiser, and we wanted to get a chance for me to get into one of your vehicles, and you arranged for one of your Earth Cruisers to be available for me to drive in Fraser Island and around Australia. Yeah. And I had such an amazing time in that vehicle, and it showed me what was possible in a vehicle that was designed for true round-the-world international travel. And there was a lot that I learned from that because I've driven a lot of different campers, and it was unique to see something that was so purpose-built for that.
Sure.
So very, very, very cool. But I think one of the things that makes you so notable in the industry is the fact that you not only build campers, but you also are very well traveled yourself as an individual. And one of the ones that you told me about just a few minutes ago was trying to make it to Cape York in the wet. So tell us how that went.
It went really well. I mean, this is a lifetime ago now, but yeah, so it was just a little Hilux, nothing exciting. And we just really wanted it was a see if you can moment. And
sure.
I forgot how many creek crossings. I forgot all about that sort of stuff. And look, you travelled Australia. I mean, some of those tracks people use to get the kids to school, right?
Sure.
So don't be a moron and go and wreck people's tracks. We're very capable. We think about that. So, but the old Telegraph track, tried to follow the beach as much as we possibly could. All that sort of stuff it was an adventure. We simply wanted fun if we could. It was, swim across. With a winch cable on the other side, all that sort of stuff. Have your mate, because I went with a mate, have a mate tie a rope to you just because when those rivers start to go, and they really go, the flash floods are really fast. All that.
And how many vehicles did you have?
2.
And what vehicles did you do it in?
The other one was a not known here. It was Holden Rodeo. Basically a little, it's kind of a Isuzu Trooper sort of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, a little diesel motor. Both are little diesels. It was just fun. It's what, to my mind, it's supposed to be about.
Right.
The trucks weren't particularly special. I mean, this is quite a while ago now. Trucks weren't particularly special. It wasn't about that. It was about just to see if we can.
See if you can do it.
Yeah. We spent some really good times with Aboriginal communities in really remote places when other people don't normally go.
Yeah, wonderful people, amazing people.
Incredible. Learn something every day. It's just, again, big part of it for us is just doing that. It wasn't that it was, we wanted to be legends. You kind of want to test yourself, but not in a silly way.
Right.
Only because it's just fun, and you don't forget them. You don't. Yeah. I'm a big believer in that you remember the moments, not the years. And for me, that's a big part of travel.
Yeah,
it really is.
No question. And it's also, it adds an element of excitement when you've got to wade across this water crossing, but it's also filled with crocs. I think there's been a lot of Germans that have been consumed by crocodiles in northern Australia.
Well, there's just for your listeners, a quick story about crocs. If you're going to go fishing in, wherever the crocodiles are, I mean, not just in Australia, but quick story, I mean, I'm sure you've been told this, is that you never ever go to the same water hole in the same place 3 times.
Oh, okay.
He can see you and he'll let you go the first time. You go the second time, he goes, all right, now he's sized you up. And the third time, you're lunch. And so it's seriously. So you don't ever put your swag down the same place 3 times. Don't do it. Don't do it. Move it. Even if it's the same campsite, move it. if you're going to go fishing, clearly don't go and clean your fish where you just standing to be fishing.
Oh,
Don't
sure.
ever, if you're going to go fill
Get
up
all
your
the
water
blood
bottles,
and everything else there.
yeah, don't go fill your water bottle anyway. But don't go and clean your pots and pans in the same place 3 times. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, and it's the same in Africa too. I remember I was on a friend's farm, big farm near the Kruger, and it was this beautiful, and it was a hot day, and it was this, and there was a lot of white water and everything. I'm thinking, there's no way there's going to be crocs and stuff up here, and so I get working down a little bit closer to the river, and I start throwing rocks into the various pools and stuff, and sure enough, here goes a tail, this giant crocodile, and it made me realize, you just don't do it. You just can't do it.
It's their world. I mean, and isn't that another great part of traveling?
I love it.
You're pulling back a veil into a new exciting place, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to open your eyes to it, if you want to stay, if you want to stay in the airport, that's great. But I think it's a mental brain snap we have to do.
Right.
That you go, okay, I've landed at this new place, wherever it may be, and I'm going to do the very best I can to say hello in whatever language, and I've got to start when I walk off the airplane.
Oh, that's great advice. And one of the things that I've loved doing is I'll download a book on the history of the country that I'm going to go visit. And I also do get a small language book as well. Usually you can get an app for that for whatever language you're going to be encountering. But learning those pleasantries, learning how to say hi. They know that you don't speak the language fluently, but the fact that you've made an effort, they really respond well to that.
And I learn, right? I mean, you whatever, right? You're off the airplane, you book into a motel, whatever you're going to do. Then, you try and write it out, and it's such an icebreaker at that first moment. All right.
Yeah. For
okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to write it out in a way that I can remember it, and explaining that to whoever it is this the way I say hello in Mongol?
Yeah. Sure.
You've been to Mongolia, haven't you?
I have. Yeah.
I love Mongolia.
Is that one of your most favorite places to travel?
It's one of the most favorite places in the whole wide world to me.
And where did you travel in Mongolia?
Well, you go Ubi. So we've got customers there. So to me, it's kind of sort of cheating.
Yeah.
Because I can just go there.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Pick up a truck and drive around, carry on. So, but I love Mongolia.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. The northern part of Mongolia. When I went from Russia into Mongolia and then crossed the northern tracks, and it was so remote, and it was just so beautiful to be you drive for hours on this perfectly manicured grass almost, and then here's a beautiful creek. Let's camp here, and then the next morning the locals have ridden up on their camel, their Bactrian camel, or their horses or whatever, and they're interacting with you. It's a really special place.
It really is. I was lucky enough, through one of my mates in Mongolia. We went out and visited. So, and I actually didn't know this. So a lot of the sheep aren't owned by the shepherds.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that. There's a real hierarchy of who owns the sheep. And the shepherds, I don't think it's a proper lease, but there's some sort of, I don't know, agreement as to where pasture is going to move, and as the seasons go up and down, as they can bring the livestock up and down. Anyway, so story short is that we went out to visit some of his friends who were the shepherds, and we stayed in the. This is a real family. This wasn't a tourist nothing, right? This is his friends had just got close enough to where we were that we could reach them in a Land Cruiser.
Amazing.
Oh, it was fabulous. And so this might sound a little bit odd, but anyway, so it's a big deal. I got to be the guest of the day, and of course I speak no Mongol.
Right.
And my friends, they're so fabulous. They speak German, they speak Russian.
Sure.
Yeah, so embarrassing.
I know.
It's pathetic. So it was, they just went out, grabbed one poor sheep, and we went from there to have a true Mongol feast. Wow. And so then other shepherds come in from different places on the little horses, and it was fabulous. If you, again, why do you travel? Because you get to do that.
Yeah, those experiences, they sear into your memories. I remember I was somewhere in northern Mongolia, and I came across this family, and they had their gur and everything, and they offered me this fermented mare's milk, which I was really grateful that they also gave me a vodka shooter because that fermented mare's milk was rough.
Yeah.
It was like this chunky, you know.
I know it.
It was terrible.
Oh yeah,
It was terrible.
you don't forget. That's one of those moments you don't forget, right?
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. I mean, I'm so glad I did it, but it didn't taste good.
Oh, it was very special. And they told me it's sensational hangover cure.
Oh,
I can't say that I've experienced that as a hangover cure, but they swear by the stuff. And they're little kids. They can ride before they can walk.
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Isn't it great? They've never lost their skills.
Yeah.
Never lost their skills, you know. And here I was riding one of these horses looking like a complete idiot. And these little kids just go whoosh straight past you. It's just too good.
Oh, yeah. They're so talented at it. I remember when I was in Tom Tor along the Road of Bones in Russia, and that was actually one of the northernmost outposts of the Mongol Empire. And when the Mongol Empire contracted, they stayed there. And so when you go to that part of Russia, these are Mongolians that are still living there, and they have a lot of the Mongol traditions that you can still see. So it's really neat to see how far that empire expanded into Asia.
Oh, they made it to Baghdad. I mean, you know, they went all over Europe. I mean,
did.
And I get corrected. It is not Genghis Khan. It is Chenghis Khan.
Yeah.
And it's anyway.
Yeah, we learned it the wrong way, didn't we?
Exactly.
Yeah, in our schools. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then you recently did a trip that looked like it was such a challenge in such a positive way too, crossing Kalimantan.
Yeah.
And tell us about what you did with that journey. How did it get brought about? Who did you do it with?
Okay, no, really good. So I've been very, very fortunate. I mean, again, I think that's one of the great parts of international travel. You have mates all over the world, right?
Right.
And so a number of years ago, some friends of mine said, listen, we're thinking about doing a trip east to west, following the equator across Kalimantan, Borneo. And why are we going to do that? They said, because it's never been done before. And I said, well, now that sounds interesting. I'd love to go. If we can pull that together, that'd be terrific. And so, fast forward a couple of years, because imagine it, right? You know, Indonesia is a very modern place and wonderful place. And, you've got private land, you've got jungle, you've got some agricultural land. All of that had to be stitched together if we were going to keep the commitment of 1 degree. And so that took a couple of years for
just logistics.
Oh yeah, and permissions, and we had to cross logging leases and stuff like that, and they just don't let people in. You can imagine how all that would.
Those natural resources are well guarded.
Yeah, big time. I mean, there's a really good book, and it's called The Last Wild Man of Borneo.
Okay,
and it's if someone would like to get a quick glimpse of what Borneo is, that's a great book.
Oh, good suggestion.
Yeah, it's really good. And so it gives you a glimpse of how the competing mineral rights, we have environmental, we have, of course, the logging, and we have all the indigenous tribes, and how does all that work out on a relatively small area that was once upon a time that owned that part of the world. I mean, once upon a time the Bahasa, which is a language also, but they, ruled a lot of Asia, in parts of China included,
Wow.
And so there's a lot of deep history there that it's not often taught to us. And so anyway, so story short is, so we literally winched ourselves across once. Oh, it was excellent fun.
Yeah, every picture you sent me was like thigh deep or hip deep mud and a winch line.
Exactly, yeah.
And what vehicles did you use for that?
I had the only Nissan, so I got a little Nissan Patrol Shorty. I can't help myself. And so we shipped that vehicle over to Jakarta. Had some friends there help us with some logistics there, which is, again, it's that network community.
Sure.
It's wonderful. So Justinas, he helped us with that. Couldn't get the tires that I wanted. I mean, why would anybody be selling jungle tires in Bend, Oregon?
Were you trying to get Cymex or?
No, we didn't. I didn't necessarily want the Cymex. So we've got the Centipedes. I've had them before, and I've had the Jungle Trucker 2s before. But it's funny how things change, right? Technology changes all the time.
Sure.
The Centipedes didn't really have enough real side bite. I mean, they're very, very good for going straight. They are not terrific for climbing up the side of a hill.
Oh,
You've got to turn the wheel too much. We wanted to basically I know it's hard to say on air, but we wanted to sort of climb sideways up hills.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Because there is no road. right? There's no lovely wheel tracks to sit in and bite. It isn't. So
you needed that lateral grip so you didn't
time.
slide down.
Exactly. And so now, Indonesia's got a booming tire industry specializing in jungle tires. So things like that. So
what did you end up using for the tire brand? Do you remember?
It's an Indonesian brand.
Okay, sure. And it worked.
Oh, they're fabulous.
Ah, cool.
We drove around on one completely flat tire for 2 days. There was just nowhere to change it. It just wasn't possible. And so
we'll include that in the show notes. The brand that
I'll do that. Sorry,
that's great. No, it's good.
I probably couldn't pronounce the Bahasa
properly.
Anyway.
We'll include it.
Yeah,
and we'll also include some pictures of Lance winching and his Nissan Patrol and stuff.
But it's the camaraderie. It's the you go. I strongly believe that the jungle never actually wants you to really leave. It's
going to keep a part of you.
It's going to keep a part of you, and you start to go into it, and like we left the road, and it was just a walking track, and that was it. We just kept going, and so it was. I really the jungle never wants you to really leave, but you've got to work together with people. Some people we'd never met before.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, you're either winching them down something sheer, and they are 100% depending on you. And in a few hours or a few days' time, it took us best part of a month. A few hours, a few days' time, your life literally depends on them. They are winching you sheer down, who knows what. And if they don't know what they're doing, it could be not fabulous.
What was the high point of that trip? What was that one standout memory or part of the adventure that was so extreme that it really was an earmark?
Probably the canoes. We arranged, one of the rivers was just too high to winch across or drive across, and so we arranged for canoes. So we winched the vehicles down onto canoes, and the locals did a really good job of it. They were just canoes. And we just put the vehicle, unloaded all the vehicles, took all our gear across to the other side. Then they paddled the canoes across, and then there was a sheer winch straight up. And so actually my kite fell the back canoe, because we did it at night time, the exit at night time. And so the back canoe, it sunk. And so the back of my car went underwater. And so it's those moments that you go, you don't panic, you don't worry, you just do it by the numbers. You hit the winch, you got good gear, you put together the vehicle the way it should be put together, and you trust the guy on the other side of it. Yeah. And you just, what else are you going to do? You're going to sit there and scream? Nobody cares. I mean,
it's not going to get you out of that.
It's not going to get you out of it, right? Yeah. And we've still got another 2 weeks of jungling to do yet, so it doesn't matter what happens, And so I'd say it again and again. You build your truck for that moment. Don't build your truck for the moment when it's so nice and sitting in that showroom, or so nice and sitting in the garage, you can sit around and talk about it. Don't build it for that, because that's not where it matters.
Yeah, build it for getting out there and doing something interesting.
Yeah, at the worst possible time.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, so you don't forget that one. That was a really good one. And on that same night, so now where some of our companions on one side of the river, we're on the other side of the river, and we'd been camping in the jungle the whole time, blah, 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 wet, mosquitoes, all that
How did you
stuff.
camp? Using hammocks? Or?
No. Again, it's camaraderie. It's kind of what you do it for,
Yeah.
So, just two vehicles together, winch strap over the top, tighten the winch, and run a tarp over it.
Okay, sure.
Right? And so it was all bloke trip. There was no ladies on the trip. And so, we put 4 stretchers underneath there. Stretchers are better for flash flood. You're up off the ground a little bit.
Sure.
You can manage the mosquitoes and snakes and whatever a little bit better than 2. And it's just a really good fly net. So very, very simple. Very, very simple. Simple as good. Simple as good. Simple as good.
Yeah,
simple
all
as
the time.
good. Yeah. And so that's how we slept. Anyway, so we'd been wet for, goodness knows how long. And so then there was a mosque there, and it's just a really simple. There is no road to this little village, nothing like that.
Sure.
And so there's a very simple mosque there, and one of the fellows said in Bahasa, if you, I don't speak Bahasa, if you'd like to sleep in the mosque, you're welcome. And I said, well, are you sure? Because I'm not Muslim. And I said, look, a mosque is, this is sign language, a mosque is a place of sanctuary. You are most welcome. And it poured rain that night, and I had the most fabulous night's sleep. And
got to dry your feet out a little bit and everything else. Sure.
Yeah, and I guess some people may take an objection to that, but that's okay. I mean, because you're in somebody else's country, and when they offer you such a courtesy, that's really stunning to me.
I agree. And you take advantage of that opportunity to see that side of humanity.
And people are just people, right? And at sunrise, they had morning prayers, and they, I tried to stay to the corner and respectful, and you don't be, take your shoes inside and all that sort of stuff. And it was, so you asked me the two things of that. Yeah. They're the two things.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And so it took you about a month in total then?
Yeah, it was gone for just a month. Yeah, just a little over a month.
What a memory that would be of having that experience. And what would you say, just kind of more on the technical side of things with the vehicle? So you had a short wheelbase Nissan Patrol. Mm-hmm. What were maybe the top 3 modifications that you did to the vehicle for that trip that really stood out in your mind as making the difference?
All right. So clearly a really good quality winch. Right.
Yeah.
So I had put the Warn 8274 on it. My truck's 24 volt by choice, but I put a 12 volt motor on it. The reason is it goes faster with more torque.
Okay.
And it's a really easy thing to do. So there's that. Making sure that we could carry enough water. Being hydrated is dreadfully important, of course.
Oh, sure.
We try and avoid those plastic bottles. We could do our little part, right? Mm-hmm. If we're in a position to put in some decent sized water tanks and water filtrations, which we can, why wouldn't you? Right. And then decent fuel tank. Right. So
where you have the range. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as far as modifications, I wouldn't say there's a lot of modifications. We can have a look at it if you like. It's pretty basic, and that's important. But I would class it as get-outable, right? So we did burn out a winch motor trying to pull ourselves out of something, and so now we're stuck, right? The back of the vehicle, again, is underwater, stuck. The winch motor doesn't work anymore. There's no one to pull us out because we were the lead car at that point, and we're stuck. Right now, not only are we stuck, nobody can get around us.
Sure. To
do anything. Right. So now, problem. And so, when you pack that winch motor, don't put it at the very back where you got to pull everything out. It's simple things like that you really got to think about. Seriously. Yeah. And so you don't. I mean, so think of the things that you are really going to need at the worst possible scenario and put them where you can get them.
Yeah, and I've seen people do that with their medical kits. They'll put the medical kit in the very back of the drawer system, or they'll have it under a pile of, when you need it right away. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, if you've got an ashtray or center console, what you should have there, in my humble opinion, you should have plenty of those little sanitary, wipes for, what do you call them?
Like a wet wipe?
Exactly. They should be there with Band-Aids.
Sure.
Should be. Those two things should be there all the time. You should never have to go dig for those, because if you can deal with a simple, particularly in like a jungle environment, if you can deal with that in the first couple of minutes, it's going to make all the difference in the world. I remember one of your recent podcasts, you were talking about making sure your teeth are in good nick. That's really smart. Yeah. It sounds silly, but it's not. I mean, it's a case of, if you're really, humble opinion, really traveling, that means you're going somewhere and you are not going back to where it was that you were safe. Mm-hmm. You are going to somewhere new now. And so if you can avoid it, don't put yourself in a position where you have to get to somewhere to be safe or to be comfortable. Right. And safe means different things to different people. To me, it just means it shouldn't be a forced march. There is no medal for being the most miserable.
True.
You know what I mean? There's not.
So true.
Look, I got the whole way with no shoes. Or why didn't you buy some shoes? You know what I mean? True. It's not like that. Yeah. So simple things that one can prepare for themselves. So if this got really bad, what is it they want at hand?
Mm-hmm.
You want some water? You want some food? So whatever bits and pieces you think you might need. So that's it. So, mate, I can't really say that there's a laundry list of things that we did to the vehicle outside of being very purposeful on what the vehicle was designed to do. And I think might be the question you asked me.
Yes.
Is what is it that we could do to make it so it's going to fit our purpose?
Right.
And that's what we could do.
And it's the Nissan Patrol. in the times that I've used them in Africa and in Australia, they're really exceptional vehicles. Is that kind of your wagon of choice?
Yeah, I've had a couple of patrols and spoiled a little bit. I got a Nissan Patrol, GQ Patrol, only because there was no other one in the US that I could find.
Okay,
so
cool.
to me that makes the most logical thing that I should do. And I've had them, and I know them.
Yeah,
and they're pretty basic. They're a little TD42, 4.2 litre diesel motor, 5-speed gearbox, 4 disc brakes, 4 coils.
Yeah.
So they're no powerhouse, but
they work. They're really tough.
Yeah, they're tough. On that trip, we tore out all of the brake lines, just all the vines, just destroyed the brake lines. So we did most of the trip with no brakes. But it's got a really good transmission handbrake. Some redundancies were built into those things a long time ago that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, they're really robust. In fact, I remember when I was crossing one of the big glaciers in Iceland, we were using some 70 series Land Cruisers, and to make them robust enough to take the 44-inch tall tires, they actually put Nissan Patrol axles underneath the Land Cruiser.
When we used to do off-road racing, the winch challenges, which are very, very similar to the Camel Trophy, but under a stopwatch, is that we would get, say, 75 series Land Cruiser, cut the axles out of it, and put Nissan Patrol under it, because the 75 has really good vision. The Patrol loses a little bit. It's got a big bonnet, so if you're going vertical, it's really hard to see.
Sure.
With the 75, it's much better. So that was a common thing we do. Yeah, take out the 75 axles, put Patrol GQ GU under it. Yep.
Now you've been involved with the Rainforest Challenge for years.
For a long time.
Have you competed in that event?
A number of times. Yeah.
And how did that go?
Well, actually, that's how I met Michelle. So I met my wife. I guess that makes sense. So I met Michelle and the Rainforest Challenge. She was competing and I was competing.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah.
And what year was that?
That was in '97.
Okay, that event definitely got a lot of international attention at several points because it was so extreme.
Yeah.
And there were even some American teams that went over and tried to be competitive. There was was it Eddie Angel out of
Alaska? Yeah,
Alaska.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I met him a few times. Interesting guy.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of them tried to be competitive. Now, did you ever do the Outback Challenge in Australia?
Yep, certainly did.
Yeah, that was
did that as well. Yeah, that was good. But things have seasons, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and those have changed for sure.
They have. It's the way vehicles are. I don't know. I think sometimes Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia to a point has a slight, and South Africa for sure, has a slight advantage when it comes to building overland vehicles because they use them all the time.
They do.
In really difficult situations.
Yeah.
They may not be the prettiest, but they're going to get you there and get you going, and that counts.
Yeah, there's certain amount of practicality that I've seen in the Australian and the South African vehicle projects because they really do need them to work in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So you don't see as many high performance modifications. You see more durability focused modifications.
Yeah. I mean, they may not be the prettiest, but it sure beats a first class walk.
Yeah,
and that's your next option.
Well, and with all of your travels and the fact that you grew up in Australia and which is where the term overlanding actually originated in many ways. What does overlanding mean to you as a traveler?
Well, I'm not sure it's got to be necessarily. It absolutely is not the biggest wallet wins. It is absolutely not, in my humble opinion, that I'm driving around in something and you're sort of I'm doing a lot of umming here. For me, a couple of things I try to. Maybe I could give you an example.
Sure. So
we were in Senegal. In one of our trucks. We're in Senegal. And so there's a place in Senegal where it's a habitat for pink flamingos. And so we wanted to go there. Anyway, so it was, again, very remote, but Africa. There's a lot of people that live in Africa.
Sure.
Right. And so anyway, wherever you stop, you're going to see a ton of people. So we were driving through this reserve, I guess we'd call it, and this guy stopped, and we didn't know anybody. It was getting dark, and we hadn't figured out where we were going to stay yet, because a couple of places we were going to stop, it just didn't feel right, so we went to somewhere else. Anyway, and there was a ferry that was going to close soon, and we're trying to decide, should we keep going that night, catch that ferry, and go into the Gambia and stay in the Gambia, or what we're going to do? We didn't know. So anyway, we got to this reserve, and this guy stepped out, and he had a sort of a uniform on, which, as you know, you've been in Africa,
Sure.
that could mean anything.
Right.
And and through broken French, it was the toll is €100. €100 in Senegal is a lot of money.
Right.
And I thought,
It's a month's wages.
it's a lot of money, And I thought, and I said, that doesn't seem right. It felt, this guy's really having a go at us. And we kept trying to communicate. And he went off, and he got his boss, he was the real deal. And he come back, he spoke great English. And I felt terrible because and I've not forgotten, because that guy, he was just trying to look after the flamingos, and the toll was €100. Right? And here I was, my first thought were, this guy's just trying to rip me off, because I had a preconceived idea of what should happen. And I was wrong. And I felt so bad for that guy, because for one, he stood his ground, which I really respected, very respectfully, but I could see the anger in him, because he could see that I was putting him in a box and I was 100% wrong. And I wish I could have enough French to say, I apologize. I'm so sorry. And so to answer your question, what is overlanding for me? It is getting out of, you can say comfort zone, but just for one moment living in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You've driven through some amazing places yourself. Would I be able to even survive or even thrive and feed a family with what those people could do? More often, not a chance. I'd starve and die.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? And to have a moment, that's to me, that is everything.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in Uganda. I met a woman, and she was trying to get her kids to the next town to go to school, which was 18 kilometers away. Mm-hmm. And I spent a little bit of time in their village, and I at the end of the day, I had this realization that on the day that I work my hardest in my life, I will not work as hard as she does every single day.
Mm-hmm. It's a humbling. It's a humbling.
It was a real realization for me.
Yeah. And so things like that really matter. I mean, we were driving around Malaysia, in one of our trucks, having a wonderful time, and one of our friends said, "Come back to my town, my place for dinner." Yes, please. Love Malaysian food.
Yeah, sure.
And so he's got a lovely little 80 series cruiser, and I was flat out keeping up with him. He's flew through the back of this little town. It was really quite fun. Anyway, and I thought to myself, if the truck I had was any bigger, I'd be missing out on dinner right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
sure.
So there's those two opposites. So what is overlanding to me? It is being in a position to put yourself in someone else's shoes for just a little while.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that idea. I like that definition in a way, because it gives us something to aspire to, is to experience something unique from our own culture, something different from our own life. And we probably learn a lot more about ourselves in that way.
Well, I know I do.
Yeah.
And maybe we earn a glimmer of respect from the people's country that we're guests in. And sometimes it's easy to forget that we're guests in somebody else's country. And go catch a local bus. Don't go get on the fancy one. Just go figure out the local one. You'll have a completely different trip.
Totally different.
Oh, yeah. Michelle and I did that in Vietnam. We just figured out the transit system.
They call them a chicken bus for a reason. There's chicken and goats and everything on there.
Just wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful.
It is wonderful. And the people you meet, and then, it's great. I mean, Laos and Cambodia, push bikes, local transport, fantastic. Just couldn't recommend it enough. Have you been to Laos?
No, I haven't. I'd love to go.
Laos. Love Laos.
Yeah, I haven't spent enough time in Southeast Asia, so I need to do that. Matt has, but I haven't.
Yeah, it's relatively easy from Australia. I mean, I've spent no time in South America, which I really, really, really want to do. From Australia, it's just a long, long way away.
It is.
But Asia, it's much easier. So anyway, it's all good fun.
Well, I love your definition. Thank you for sharing that, Lance. That's very cool. One of the things that you do is run Earth Cruiser, which makes expedition campers that are designed to travel around the world. Within the context of someone that's listening that's interested in buying a camper, what do you think are some of the most important things for them to consider? Again, if their intention is to go see the world by vehicle, by a camper, what would you have them look for?
Well, I'm going to assume the we is a husband and wife.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
Okay.
Probably common, right?
Yeah. And so then the world's a big place. But for wherever you want to go, I would really work hard at the livability. Livability is, could I change a tire?
Yeah.
Right? Livability is, if I had to be in this vehicle for a long period of time, is there enough separation to make sure there isn't a major separation? Huh. We all need our personal space. If you're going to travel with a group or as individuals, either way you'll catch up and you will meet people, and you may or may not want to invite them into what is now your home. And it's funny how vehicles have a way of latching onto us, isn't it?
Sure.
Personality. They do. They really do. So ask yourself, has this thing got the personality that I'm looking for? And the ultimate question I really think is, am I going to serve it or is it going to serve me? My meaning is that am I at a level in my own self where am I always going to be worried about this, or am I going to be, no, this is okay. I can park it wherever I want to park it. I can get into tons of details about how things are put together, but really, who's going to be in charge here? Am I going to be the one always worried about this thing? Because if that's the case, no thank you.
Buy a different thing. Yeah.
It's not working for you, whatever that is.
Sure.
And that's a personal thing to everybody, and that's all there is to that. But to me, it's the livability. If you want to go out and see if you can make vehicle ABC, get around the world, great, knock yourself out. But if you want to go out there and go, I want to go and see and experience as much as I can, you shouldn't be worried about it.
Well, and that's interesting because when we interviewed Dan Grech, that was one of the things that we asked him, which was what was next for his vehicle. And he says, I need more inside space. I need more livability while he's living on the road. Mm-hmm. And that also came up with Graham Bell, who's another family that spent 10 years traveling around the world.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yeah, in a Defender.
How good's that?
He's amazing. Yeah. Amazing family.
Yeah, not wrong.
Him and Louisa. And I asked him, what was the most significant modification to his Defender? And he said it was when I put a camper on the back of it. So it does seem to be a consistent thread that those that are traveling long-term around the world, maybe they start with something like a wagon, but they realize relatively quickly that for them to be able to continue to travel around the world and live on the road, they need to have a place to retreat to, a place to live.
Again, it's not a forced march. There's no badge for being miserable.
Right.
It just isn't. No, I'm sorry. I mean, people want to talk about the war stories, and but there's so much more to it than that.
There really is. And the war stories don't really come along that often, right? Most of it is that you took a beautiful hike that day, or you interacted with some locals at a market. These are you're living your life just like you would in Bend, Oregon, where we're at now. It's just that they speak a different language, right? Mm-hmm. So
anyway, so to me, No,
I like that. I like that idea of making sure that it's livable for what you need and what your partner needs. That's
at that moment in time.
Yeah,
because
it can change.
It changes. It's fun, isn't it? Things always change, but we're surprised and disappointed when it does.
Yeah, so true. And I think about campers for international travel because oftentimes people do aspire towards that. That is definitely something that we see our community aspiring towards, is buying, whether it's a full-size truck and fitting a camper to it, or buying a complete camper unit. And if you're considering domestic travel, then you want something that is domestically available and can be domestically serviced and meets the needs, like, for example, in North America, something that can travel at 75 miles an hour down the road, which of course your campers do as well. But one of the things that I think once you start to consider international travel, there are some attributes that I look for in a camper. First of all, can I put it in a container? And that's because there are many places in the world where roll-on, roll-off is not available. And with roll-on, roll-off, you have a diminished level of security around your personal effects. Even though I've not had any issues with roll-on, roll-off myself, but you hear the horror stories of people having issues with roll-on, roll-off. So I think that if I was looking for an international camper, it would be, can I fit it in a container so that it can be secure and shipped out of Magadan as much as it can be, out of Montevideo or wherever. And that seems to be very effective. And then also, can the vehicle be serviced in those countries, and can it consume the local fuels? And that leads me to a question about some recent drivetrain changes that you did with your campers, where you've gone to a gasoline V8. Kind of share some of the philosophy behind that decision and why you're using a gasoline motor now instead of a diesel.
Sure. Can I just talk about the containerization first?
Yeah, of course.
We make a couple of different varieties. One's called the EXP, and that goes into a container. It takes about 15 minutes to do it. And so, yes, we've done that many times. It is very nice having your own stuff. It's there. We put our dry goods, our clothes, etc. It's all in the truck. And so when we pick it up, it's there. And you've already got a million things going on. Did I leave the fridge on at home? Did I leave the iron on? Did I cancel a newspaper? You've already got a million things going on. So the more you can mitigate that, the better off you are, and have a better time faster.
Sure.
Humble opinion. And so also with the containerization, we don't ever pick the vehicle up from the port. We never do that. Whereas if you got row, typically you have to.
You have to, sure.
And the reason that another reason why containerization may not make obvious sense is that we have agreements with shipping companies because we do enough of it. But we always pick the vehicle up from a bond store. A bond store is the equivalent of the wharf, but it's not run by the government. Why that's important is, if you're not breaking any rules here, we're not doing anything wrong, is that the wharf is typically a government. And so if you've got a right or a left-hand drive vehicle and you're in the wrong country, you could have that guy who's now responsible for you driving off the wharf saying, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get a permit before this leaves the wharf.
Yeah, sure.
That can ruin your day right there. And it just depends on the day, whoever that guy's mood. Seriously.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time that I shipped vehicles back from the Darien Gap, when we went to the Darien Gap and we were in Panama, and I decided I was going to do it all myself because I wanted to learn how it all worked out. That was the last time I ever did it all myself. After that, you use a customs broker, and you take delivery of the container out of the port in a port bonded facility, and then you can cut the lock off yourself. You open it up, and they always have some people there to support you, and it makes such a huge difference.
Massive difference, because you're right. So at the bond store, there is no federal government person there because it's already been cleared by customs. And so you can literally drive it out of that yard or workshop, whatever it is, and you're on your way. That's a big deal.
It does make a difference.
That's a big deal. From moving vehicles over to Malaysia and stuff, getting caught at the port is not pleasant. So that's a side thing about containerization.
That's great.
And so as far as what's happening in our big wide world right now, it's just reality. It's run by economics, if we like it or not. Ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, we know about that. So some big things that happen now, that ships are now going to have to be required to use ULSD. The diesel engines we have now are not the diesel engines we fell in love with. Things change.
Sure.
It makes no sense whatsoever for large organizations to spend money on getting those diesels even more compliant, miss the boat on electric. That's just economic suicide. And so the internals of the diesel engines are still very, very good. It's all the emission systems that go on the outside that make them difficult. And the decision was taken by Fuso, who's owned by Mercedes, which is Daimler, the ones who invented the diesel engine, to discontinue them.
Sure.
And so that's what's happened. And so for the foreseeable future, we'll be running around on gasoline, which is incredible.
And gasoline, I mean, people oftentimes think that diesel is the most ubiquitous fuel in the world. That's not been my experience, because every little village has filled with motorcycles,
Exactly
and
right.
motorcycles don't run on diesel, they run on
Exactly.
gasoline.
Exactly right.
And I've been able to find gasoline everywhere in the world, even crossing the Silk Road, which I did in a Suzuki Jimny. It was a gasoline motor. I never once had issue finding gasoline.
Exactly right. I mean, there's plus minus to everything.
Of course, yeah, of course.
You don't get the range. Sorry, you
Yeah.
don't get the density of fuel. Understood. We get all that.
A little bit of difference in the safety of the fuel for storage and everything else.
One is known as a combustible, the other one's flammable.
Yeah.
One's explosive, one's a flammable, right?
Yeah.
So we get all that. The emission rules didn't disappear. I mean, they're still incredibly strict, which we have to adhere to, which is fine. We can handle all that. But again, let's go back to the livability part of it. Do you want to be able to insure this thing? Do you want to be able to get this thing serviced?
Sure.
Do you want it to be such a hodgepodge that you don't know what you actually got? No, that's nonsense. You don't want that. And so having it legal, safe, reliable, yes, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just that simple.
I look forward to driving it, seeing how it does. We'll talk about that at a future podcast, I'm sure. So
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's exciting to see what you guys have done throughout the years with an emphasis on international travel. And oftentimes when I look for a camper image in the middle of the road of bones, it's oftentimes an earth cruiser, because it just seems that those vehicles have been adopted by international travelers as something that's very suitable. And I believe that a lot of that comes from the fact that the Fuso is an international platform. It's just like a Land Cruiser around the world. They use medium duty trucks, and the Fuso is oftentimes the one that they use for that.
Yeah, I mean, again, livability, right? Simple things. If you smash your windscreen, you could put some plastic up, but are you going to get a good night's sleep?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're going to be worried about it all night, right? So those livability, it's those things that count to us. If you get a flat tire, can you easily get it fixed? Yes, please. Stuff like that.
And
so important.
You're so right about windshields. People do not think about that when they want to take this really obscure vehicle and drive it around the world. Where are you going to get a windscreen for it? And the reality is, once you get into the developing world, rock chips and everything else that comes with it,
I look forward to it.
or a branch or a piece of pipe that comes out of a building, any number of things that's going to smash a windshield. It happens
all the time,
all of the time. So being able to replace a windshield is a big deal.
As an example, I like to use a windshield, windscreen windshield as an example, because shipping them is really hard. Some people just won't do it.
Yeah, because they're so hard to arrive in one piece.
Exactly, they will not take responsibility for it.
Yeah,
and so that can ruin your trip. And again, it's not supposed to be a misery, right?
Yeah.
You've got better things to do than worry about stuff like that.
Well, you've spent a lot of time in Australia and with Australian manufacturers, and you've used a lot of Australian trailers and campers.
Yeah.
What do you think Australian manufacturing and an Australian mindset brings to something like a camper that's unique? What are some of the attributes of Australian manufacturing and design that you think adds to?
Well, I think... So typical in Australia, we get 4 to 5 weeks holiday a year, which is unheard of in a lot of places, right? So
especially here.
Yeah, indeed. And so that actually has a big influence on the product, because if you're going to be traveling around the world or traveling around Australia or just going to Fraser Island for 2 weeks, that camper is going to be sat on your favorite fishing spot on the beach for the next 2 weeks, right? And so you're going to get a lot of customer feedback.
Right.
That counts, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's a big thing, mum, dad, the kids, the mates come over for barbie and all that sort of stuff. So so the manufacturers have a very good direct line to what works, what doesn't. And you've been to the Caravan and Camping Show in Brisbane. Brisbane's roughly 1 million people, and the show is 85,000 people show up.
It is packed.
Yeah, and that's normal, right? And it's on every year. And so it's such a big industry for such a small economy. I mean, more people live in Los Angeles than live in Australia. So, camping is it's just ingrained. Everybody does it. Well, I think pretty much everybody I know. So I think part of the get right part is just really very, trust me, and it can be direct, customer feedback about what's good and what's not. And that'll filter down into the tiny little details of about maybe it's the water pump, maybe it's the fridge. It's not the fridge itself, but it's the little screws that the fridge manufacturer screwed the fridge together with is going to get paid attention to. It's that tiny little detail. So you've got this great inverter that makes 5 million watts. Hey, that's terrific. But if it falls to pieces as you're crossing the Canning stock route, I don't care. It's a piece of garbage. You know what I mean?
And if there's anything in the world that'll cause a vehicle to come apart at the seams, it's Australian corrugations.
Oh, yeah, they're great, aren't they?
It's incredible.
Oh, fabulous.
Now, has one of your trucks been across the Canning stock?
A number of them.
Oh, that's cool. That's such an amazing route.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think it's close to 3,000 kilometers across, maybe even a little bit more than that. That I really enjoyed. I mean, all of those sand dunes and the little water holes you find. It was just unbelievable, beautiful.
Yeah. You've gone to Simpson, to Halsey Springs, all that. Yeah.
I haven't done that. No, not that route.
No, it's really nice. Yeah. It's great. Anyway, and so I think. So for the Australian manufacturers, they get that advantage, and you can't beat experience. You just cannot. You can't fake experience. Either you have it or you don't.
Right.
And you can have the best engineers in the world. You can have the best. It's not going to help you. You've got to spend the time. You just have to. You got to know what it's like. And it's that's I think the real advantage. So if you want to flip that the opposite way, a huge disadvantage that Australian manufacturers have, in my humble opinion, is that we don't go camping in the snow for 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Right.
We don't do that. We might go skiing, but that might be able to be 1 or 2 days. Anybody can get away with 1 or 2 days. And so that to me has been interesting. You've seen some of the products that come from Australia. There's a lot of outdoor living space, which would last 30 seconds in a big snowstorm.
Or even a lot of rain. I mean, Australia just doesn't get a lot of rain.
The north can, but typically we wouldn't go. We would go somewhere else.
Sure.
Because we can.
Head a different direction.
Exactly right. And there's a lot of options there. And so I think those are a couple of really important things. The infrastructure is not necessarily there. I mean, the United States has such fabulous infrastructure when it comes to camping. It just does. I mean, the beautiful lakes and stuff, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And a lot of that doesn't exist in Australia. So the vehicles must, by design, be more self-sufficient, because you may not know where you're going to get your next lot of water, things like that. Yet they wouldn't typically, and this is not a black and white thing, but typically, we wouldn't spend a lot of time insulating water tanks. I mean, none of the earth cruisers we built in Australia have insulated water tanks. Not one of them, because what for?
You don't need it.
You don't need it. So why would you carry that? If you're not careful, that can be more of a problem than a help, because of the spin effects and gets caught up inside some of those things and cause you grief. And so like I said, you just got to have the experience. If you've ever seen a vehicle burned to the ground by spin effects, it takes not very long.
Well, I've seen the carcasses like on the Canning stock,
exactly right,
for example. But fortunately, I've not had one of my own vehicles burned down. But that'd be so scary.
And it happens like that.
Yeah,
it's incredible. And so it's all of that sort of stuff. I mean, the way the bash plates are made, the way little cubbies aren't made for things like Spinifex grass could get caught. Here, if you drive around on Spinifex grass, well, it's not exactly the same, but if you drive too much off-road here, you get in trouble.
Yeah.
In Australia, well, you can, because there's not a lot of roads, and so often that's what happens.
Yeah, I remember on the Canning stock we had to have those special radiator guards, because it was days of driving in Spinifex.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was incredible.
It's got it's very oily.
Yeah.
Depending what time of year you go there, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can actually melt that down, and you can fix your jerry cans and stuff with it. Seriously, it's fascinating. It goes as hard as Araldite. It's great.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
When you look at your library at home or your bookshelf at home, what are some of your favorite books that you would recommend that a fellow traveler read?
Oh, what a fabulous question. Oh, geez, I like that question. This one would probably be a little obscure.
I like that.
And it is Don't Split the Difference by... Sorry, I can't think of the author's name. It'll come to me. This guy was a hostage negotiator for the FBI.
Okay.
And that might seem like, hang on, what are you talking about? But it was really just about dealing with people and being able to get, and this guy worked all over the world, in the Middle East and whatever. And the book revolves a lot about understanding what's really going on in that conversation.
What do people really need?
Really, when someone says something, what did they really actually say?
Gotcha.
And I've read it a number of times now. And we were got in a tiny little bit of trouble. You got time for a very quick story?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, very quick story. We were in the Sahara. And we'd just crossed the Sahara, parts of the Sahara, I should say. The Sahara's a big place. Anyway, and Michelle said, go that way. I blame her. It's not her fault. It's my fault. She said, go that way. So I went that way and got stuck. All right. So in our EC, I got stuck. It took me 24 hours to extract it. And anyway, so then got it extracted. We went to, that's right, I got it extracted. But we thought, and I wasn't sure I was actually going to get it out. I said, there's nothing. I mean, we are talking Sahara Desert there.
Sure.
There's nothing. All right. I've extracted a few vehicles, and I'll say this is probably the hardest one I've ever done. It wouldn't matter what the vehicle was because it was just nothing. You're familiar with max tracks, I'm sure?
Sure.
Right. So one wheel turn, the max tracks, you could watch them spear underneath the sand, and you'd see a little wave. They'd go down maybe 2 or 3 feet underneath the sand.
Wow.
The sand was so fine. When you walked on it, it went to your knees. And I just come over the top of the sand dune, because we've been in the sand dunes for a week. Come over the top of the sand dune, come straight down. The truck started to go sideways. So it was right-hand top and just nailed it to get it to go straight again. And it just sunk, boom, straight down, straight to the chassis rails. And there was nothing around anyway, right? And it was getting early afternoon. So anyway, because it's cool then, so I thought I will pull it out now. And that's when we discovered what was happening with the max tracks. So the little tether just snapped because, and they call it fish or something like that, and it's basically sand water. It's just so fine. I'm no kidding. There's still 2 max tracks sitting somewhere there. I could never find them again.
Wow.
And it was like they were going through water. True story. I'd never seen anything like it before in my life, ever. I've been all over Morton Island, Fraser, blah, 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 across the Simpsons, blah, 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 done all that. Nothing prepared me for that. Anyway, so story short, we had a sat phone with us. We're there, now 20 plus hours trying to extract this thing. I thought we were still having a nice meal. We were everything, all of that was great. Living inside, that was terrific. But I was thinking to myself, this is not fabulous. So we had a sat phone, and we started to ring to see if someone might be able to just be on the other side of that sand dune so I could winch me way out, and I'd be out in 5 seconds. So we found someone. And they said, kind of weird in a weird way, yeah, we'll meet you. They never did. We got ourselves out, long story short. Now it's a full 24 hours. Stayed at this tiny little town somewhere and went to the gendarmerie because we didn't know where we were. We just need to put everything back and get sorted, Anyway, so we stopped at gendarmerie and they were great. The military place, they let us in, no big deal, nothing special. Sliding door closed behind us, and we parked the truck in their car park. 3 o'clock in the morning, it was the Mujahideen. They said, you owe us some money. They had went into the gendarmerie, closed the door behind us, so we couldn't get out.
Wow.
And that was an interesting conversation. And so they wanted this crazy amount of money, and we said, not going to do that. And so you talk about negotiating skills under pressure. I mean, we didn't have thousands of euro.
Sure.
And it was a fabulous experience because as through broken English and French, what they really wanted to do was that the way they earn and provide food for their family is not by shaking people down, is by rescuing people.
Sure.
They just thought they could be there in 2 or 3 days because time meant nothing to them.
Right.
And once because they didn't expect us to get out, so it doesn't matter. We'll get there when we get there. They got there, we were gone, and went, well, this is no good. Everybody knows everybody. You're not going to hide in a place like that. And so it was no time at all. They found where we are. We weren't, we weren't trying to hide. We just didn't know what we were going to do next. And so, story short, was that once we understood what is it that you really want, it was €100 or something, which we asked for the service. They didn't provide. That wasn't the point. The point was that we were guests in their country, and they absolutely would have provided the service.
Sure.
But just not on our time frame. And whose fault's that?
Right.
You know what I mean? It was great. Love it.
What a great story.
So and no harm done, left as friends, all terrific. But you can see how quickly that could go berserk. Right? If you've got half a dozen fellas in their normal, gear, none of them looked happy. They were mad because they were being looking for us. And you're bleary-eyed. What the heck's going on? Stuff like that, So it's a skill set, right? And that's why I like that book, is that it was if you want to go do something you've never done, if you want to do things differently, you're going to have to do things differently, right? You're going to have to learn different skills. And so that book, I think, is fabulous because it gives a moment of, I never would have thought of it that way. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Totally. And I think that's one of the things that I love about travel so much is that I am perpetually a student because every place that I go to, I don't know the language, I don't know their culture, I don't know anything. I'm completely clueless, but I'm open-minded to learning. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things about travel that appeals to me so much is I get to be a student all the time.
Yeah.
So.
And it's wonderful. Yeah. It is wonderful.
Yeah, so true.
And I just have such a great respect for the people.
Well, that's a great book suggestion. We'll add that to the show notes.
What about yourself? Well. Come on, you don't get off free. What do you got?
Well, I've been reading a couple great books. One of the ones that I've been reading a little bit more from the Stoics, and I like that. And given the time frame that we're in right now, a book that I've been reading the last couple weeks is called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and it does talk a lot about during the Roman Empire there was actually a plague as well, and the plague lasted for 15 years, and entire legions of Roman soldiers were consumed by it. And it's just a great book that discusses that the challenges that we experience in our life, we're not special. We don't deserve to have a carefree life. That life includes challenge, and it's all about how we look at the challenges from perspective of we've got to get through it. We've got to figure it out. And I think now, at least in the modern age, now is a time for challenge, and it's how we approach those challenges and how we overcome them, and the attitude that we carry through that, and the things that we learn about ourselves. Instead of being woe is me or I deserve something, we don't deserve anything.
You deserve nothing.
Yeah. So how we approach those challenges, I think, teaches us a lot. So it's been a good book.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah, I'd enjoy that too. We didn't get to choose where we were born.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful, incredibly grateful. Yeah.
And I've got one last question for you. But if someone was wanting to get into overlanding and they came up to you at an overland expo and they're wide-eyed and they see this experienced traveler, what would be the first piece of advice that you would give someone that said, "Hey, I'd love to get started with overlanding. What should I do first?" What would be your first piece of advice?
Be confident in your motivation. I mean, it's not airplanes fly right now, not all the time, but typically airplanes fly all the time, right? So be confident in your motivation. What is it? Are you going to be the next fabulous blogger? Are you going to be the next wonderful contributor to the journal? What is it that you really want to get out of it? start from there and work backwards from there. And then it'll be about vehicles, about where do I go? It's going to be all about, well, what are you hoping to get out of this?
Yeah, being authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Start
Good
there.
advice. Because I think people, they see a vision of maybe a certain type of vehicle or the way that someone travels, and they want to emulate that, and maybe they miss the mark because they haven't really decided what they want to get out of it themselves.
Yeah. I strongly believe life isn't a rehearsal. And so, things happen. But if we can do the very best we can to arm ourselves with the best education we can, we're a long way ahead.
Yeah.
And I could talk for hours about vehicles and all the rest of it, and that's great. I mean, it's clear I love trucks and travel. But really, how many times you sat around a campfire with someone who's they're just really real.
Yeah.
And it's great, isn't it? You learn so much. And, when the lights go out for the last time, you want to go, that was good.
Yeah, so true. Well, Lance, thank you so much for your
thank you.
for
I
your
really
time.
appreciate it.
I enjoyed talking with you today. I learned a lot myself, and I think that is a lesson that comes out of this podcast, is for us to all have that mindset of a student, so that way we can learn about how to be better travelers, and we can learn a little bit about those places that we visit around the world. And I really appreciate your time, Lance, and your generosity with your time here in beautiful Bend, Oregon.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's not bad at all. And we'll include a bunch of information about the Earth Cruisers in the show notes if someone wants to find out some more about what Lance and his amazing team produces here in Bend, Oregon. And we'll include some information about his patrol and where he's traveled in the world, and some links to the books that we've referenced as well. And we thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.